What is up, everybody? Mark on the mic here, as is per so often. My good friend Ryan Muckenhern across from me right now. Ryan, a while back, we did a podcast. It did absolutely famously, by the way. I think it's about 500,000 views the last time I looked, somewhere thereabouts. Why is the Tikka action so good?
Yep.
So if you're one of the people out there that listened to it, thank you. If you haven't, you might want to. It's quite popular. And it was kind of, it was part of the, I guess, the impetus of the rifle that's on the table with us right now. The other part was the customized Tikka that I borrowed of yours that I was just so absolutely fond of. Mm-hmm. And so that's this podcast. This is Mark's customized Tikka 300 WSM. That's what we're talking about today.
Podcast listener, by the way, just hold on. I'll read you the message.
Okay. Should I fill the airwaves while you kind of look through here?
Okay, here we are. Dakota Dinwoody. What's up, buddy? Submitting my formal request for a full-length podcast highlighting Mark's fancy Tikka build. This was on Friday.
That was on Friday.
You and I were sitting next to each other when I said, "Oh, it's coming."
Well, he's not the only one. I read a different comment. It's at my desk right now, so maybe I'll try and see if I can't find it. But another gentleman said, I'm a big fan of customized Tikkas.
Yeah.
I want to hear about this one. So that's so there's at least two people out there that want to hear about this thing. Man, the rifle that I borrowed from you, Ryan. Like I said, I fell in love with it. I was it was like that part of Napoleon Dynamite when the gal's like, I want that.
Oh, yeah. When we were talking about the ship in the bottle.
No, yours was a 6.5 Creedmoor. Some differences here, similar stock, but different stock. Should we go through this thing?
Top to bottom.
So it started off as a Tikka stainless 300 WSM. So hence the stainless action here. It actually shot quite well.
Yes, it did.
But I couldn't leave well enough alone. I had a plan.
No, you couldn't.
I had a plan. You were against my plan.
1,000%. 1,000%. And I'll tell you why later, but Mark, I digress.
Well, okay. Your thinking wasn't wrong. I just wanted, I wanted it because I wanted it. And I knew it was going to work, and it did. It did. Big time. Okay. Anyway, so it started off, why the negativity?
No negativity.
Well, you were giving some looks there.
Not at all.
Okay. It shot great, and I said, well, let me fix that.
That is what happened.
There was actually nothing that needed to be fixed, but I feel like what we have here is just absolutely, it's my favorite rifle that other than the sentimental value of the OG Browning A-Bolt 300 WSM, which, again, shot famously, has performed awesome, and it's been with me on many, many a hunt. So, in its own right, I love, love, love this rifle. But this is my favorite rifle that I've owned. Yeah. For just the form factor, the features, the function. It is definitely on its way to creating some great memories. Starting this fall, that's for sure. So, I put a Manners EHT carbon fiber stock on it. Again, meant to fit the Tikka action, which I feel like a lot of stock manufacturers, because these actions are so good, because they're so popular, you're seeing these custom stocks built to fit the Tikkas. And you're also seeing, and we'll get to the barrel here, which this one isn't, but a lot of pre-fit barrels to fit the Tikkas as well. And I think that's what yours was. Yours a pre-fit?
Mine is, yeah.
Yeah. We got the Manners EHT in Swamp. Now, I've wanted a stock similar to this one, a Manners stock, ever since back at the old building. Lightweight Dave came in with a custom rifle. It wasn't a Tikka, but it had a Manners stock in this this coloration.
Yep.
I mean, this is 10 years ago, more maybe. And again, I was like, I want that. And so I've just kind of I've wanted a stock of this, type of build or, these types of materials in this coloration since that very moment. This is a long time coming, Ryan.
Okay, having worked with Mark now for the better part of a decade, I'd say he's very calculated. You may think he's aloof. I don't even know if that's the right word. You're very calculated. You're not hasty on things.
No.
Sometimes I think it's a tactic to get folks like myself and James off your backside. If you just, what we see is dragging feet, you is just carefully sitting back and waiting. I've never seen Mark move so rapidly to do something like this, ever. You had this rifle for what? 6 months?
I got it. Yeah, and then I kind of like immediately went hunting with it.
Yeah,
so
correct.
I didn't really have time to kind of doodad it up.
And then there was talk
And I
of,
shot a deer and an elk with it,
Yeah.
which was really cool.
Oh, so you had it more than 6 months. Oh, no, you did. You had it 6 months, hunted it right away. By the time you reconfigured it, it had been about a year.
Yeah.
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 So I want to talk about the rifle before its current form.
Okay.
So
This is kind of what this is where you're not displeased with this rifle and the components.
Certainly not.
Just the fact that I took a rifle that was shooting really well and changed it.
So I'll tell you my side of the story. Mark had a Tikka T3X light stainless, kind of the bread and butter model. The only upgrade really is the stainless, right? So it's base model, nothing fancy. Rifle came in. We gave it the regular treatments. And so we adjusted the trigger, which they're spectacularly easy to do, retorqued the action screws, ran an alcohol swab down the bore. To the range we went. Mark had some 190 ABLR, factory loaded Nosler ammunition.
Yes.
That gun, and I am not kidding you people, Mark is really good at recoil management. I don't know if it's the dad strength component. I really don't know what it is because I shoot a lot and Mark approaches a high recoiling rifle. It doesn't look like it beats the tar out of him. And somehow he manages to shoot it better than I can. And he laid down some absolute slop. No, again, wrong adjective. Phenomenal groups.
Thank you.
One hole, all bullets through one hole, multiple times, and then multiple times again. And immediately he's like, I wonder how much weight I'd save by putting a different stock and barrel on it. I'm like, no, don't do that.
Don't touch it.
He's like, it'll only get better. I'm like, no, it won't.
Okay. So part of this is though, Ryan, the reason why I bought the rifle to begin with was to do this.
I understand.
So I did have a level of trepidation in that I'm like, wow, I have this gun that shoots awesome, right? But then I'm just going to I wanted to get here. And then if I just kept it, then I was going to have to buy another one of the same rifle essentially to get here. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I know it's going to work.
It's kind of like you get a fast car. Like, what's your objective? I want to hit 165 miles an hour. So you buy this fast car. You take it out to the track. You hit 171. Holy smokes, that's fast. We should put a different engine in it. I'm like, what? You hit 171. You wanted 165. You got more than you paid for. No. And Mark won the argument, of course, because it's Mark's rifle.
That's just human nature. We are engineered to never be satisfied.
I understand. And we learned a couple of very interesting things. What happens when you reconfigure a rifle? Good, bad, or otherwise, right? Look at your rifle as a system. So your barrel, your stock, your optic, your trigger, kind of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In the configuration you had it in, it favored that 190 ABLR ammo.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderfully. I mean, holy expletive, did it shoot good. And great loading. Phenomenal ballistics, great bullet performance, all the things that we want. Okay. We get into a reconfiguration mode here. We've got premium components. So we're using a Proof Research carbon fiber barrel. We've got this Manners EHT stock. We maintain the same optics, same rings, and of course the same action and trigger. That combination, the anticipation was perhaps, oh, this will be a turnkey.
Yep, plug and play.
Yep. What we learned was, no.
Yeah, and they shot so well initially. Like I almost need, like I actually want to go back and try again. But they weren't doing what they were doing before, so we were left scratching our heads. Luckily, over the years, I've procured about 10 different kinds of premium 300 short mag ammo.
Yes.
And so then we just started running them through them.
Yep.
Now, we also had a plan in place to hand load some stuff as well.
But before that, it was interesting for me, and it was fun talking to Mark's builder, our good friend Matt Peterson, who's been on the podcast before. That's Peterson Precision. Talking about his experience with factory Tikkas and Tikka barrels.
Mm-hmm.
And he had told us that they're one of the most lenient barrels that he's worked with. He says they're not fantastic when you look at like surface finish. He's like, it's not like they're a mirror, like this uber premium barrel. He goes, he was talking about land to groove ratio, width to depth, and then spacing, and just kind of how they do things. They make a very, very, very forgiving barrel.
Right.
And that's been my experience as well. I've generally found them not to be super picky with ammunition, except for 6.5s and factory Barnes LRX loadings.
Interesting.
Don't understand. Haven't put enough time into hand loading to figure out if that's an unsolvable problem for me. But that factory barrel shot those 190 ABLRs like magic.
Well, and I guess I'll say this. I think I burnt like a box of, I don't even remember.
Probably GMXs.
Yeah, I think it was some old GMXs that I had, kind of knowing, well, they don't make these anymore. I've got some left, like, and the old Browning shot those really, really
Very
well.
good, yeah.
So we did that, and then shot a handful of the ABLRs, and like, the group, and this, I think this is a testament to, breaking your barrel in a little bit, because the group started off like, okay, and then, 30 shots deep, it's just.
This is the factory barrel.
The factory barrel.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. And really the ABLRs were the only ammo that I tried.
Because it wasn't going to ever get better than that.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe that speaks to how it shot those just so well, or
Yeah.
maybe it would have shot everything well. I don't know.
Maybe. So we moved to this system and we tried the ABLRs after that same kind of, we'll call it fire lapping procedure. Mark and I do this a lot with new guns. We don't count the first 20 to 30 rounds. None of that matters. And even then, the barrel's still probably on an acclimation period before it plateaus.
Right.
But after about 20 to 30, we start to see some appreciable stabilization. And the ABLRs just didn't cut it. They were not what we were looking for. And we tried factory-loaded Scirocco 2s. We tried CXs, GMXs. We just do some basic soft point stuff.
I think so. I think I did have some regular Accubons as well.
Yep.
Some
Standard
180s or
Accubons.
165s. I can't remember.
And it was looking a little bleak.
Now, I will say this, like, some of these loadings would have been fine, actually. But they weren't necessarily what we were looking for or expecting out of a setup like this.
Your objective was a sub-MOA gun.
Right.
They were MOA at best.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Mark found some Precision Hunter, so Hornady Precision Hunter 200 grain ELDXs. And at the same time he was shopping, I was loading. And so I had this hope and dream of getting Mark on the Barnes train with 175 LRXs hand-loaded, 4831 shortcut powder. I was seating it to, a not standard length, and we'll touch on that here in a second. And that may be a direction you go, I hope. Please, yes. Or you stick with what's working. And I found a load, very, very tolerant load ladder. Did some coarse load workup, and then got into some finite kind of restructuring of the ladder. And it was really cool as 9 rounds landed in about a nickel.
Mm-hmm.
And that was spanning 9 different loads. And they landed in about a nickel. So we knew that right then and there. Of course, it wasn't the barrel. And you know, we use a lot of proof barrels. We know a lot of folks that use proof barrels are great barrels. We wouldn't have any other anticipation that it wouldn't be the barrel, right? But and Matt does a bang-up job chambering, so we knew that that was square and well and true. Where the gun really came to life, though, was outside of the factory allowance with the box magazine. So there's a quick pivot. Tried an L magazine from Tikka, and the geometry of the WSM case is such that I'd have to amend the factory L magazine just a bit. I'd have to remove some of the feed lip material to allow that cartridge to depart or present to the chamber sooner than it was.
Right.
And we'd also have to change the bolt stop from the S bolt stop to the L bolt stop, which is a really innocuous process. Mark was up against a time crunch, so the decision was made not to modify the magazine, nor was I necessarily rooting for the idea of sending you a field with some hand-filed mags. I'd do that kind of thing. I'm kind of a hack. I wasn't really interested in sending you on a cross-country hunt doing so.
Well, yeah, and it just even if we got it to work, like it was interesting, like you said, the timing when those 300 WSMs would depart the L mag, like it was like jamming.
Yes.
It was like an absolute no-go, and I'm like, yeah, like you said, we could fiddle with it. Maybe we get it to work.
I could get it to work.
I don't know.
It's somewhat of a worked solution, if that makes sense. But the cartridge overall length that I hit with the 175 Barnes LRX and the velocities that I hit with the 175 Barnes LRX and the accuracy single feeding was phenomenal. And it exceeded the expectations that I had for the barrel length and the cartridge with muzzle velocity too, which was just a bonus. Not that we're velocity freaks, but anytime you get a little more, that always helps. But ultimately, that didn't happen. You found those 200 grain ELDXs, factory loading. And I remember sending you a picture, even kind of before we got to the shooting of them. And I said, these 200s are going to hammer. That bullet was kind of designed, I think, around that particular cartridge. Because its ogive, or the termination of ogive to shank, is pressed considerably forward, and it was akin to where my seat to depth was with the 175 LRXs, but not anywhere near the cartridge overall length.
Mm-hmm.
And I put 3 rounds in the gun, and then I sent you a picture. I think you were with your girls that day. And I said, I think this is the load. And it was...
Because we had tried, I think that day, you were going to the range anyway after work.
And we're working on another fun project. And I said, hey, I got some of these. Can you send a couple and see if these work? And then yeah, you fired 3. It was one ragged hole. And then I immediately ordered 3 more boxes. Yeah. and ultimately, like, you know, that was very fortunate that, one, you didn't have to end up with a bullet that wasn't going to meet your expectations, because the intent for the rifle was, you know, potentially long range big game hunting, right? Mm-hmm. So if you needed a viable 500-600 yard solution, that's why you have this gun. And not that you couldn't do it with other projectiles, but like that's a purpose built bullet for doing that kind of work. And it was just fantastic that it worked out that way.
Well, and also, you know, like you said, my intent with this gun is, yeah, I can, you know, shoot critters at extended ranges. But again, I was looking for this to be my new do-all killing stick. Could I take this on a, if I ever got the opportunity, on a mountain grizzly hunt? Yes. Or could I take it on a caribou hunt? I'm making stuff up.
I've heard him mention these hunts several times in the past year.
Because they've been on my dream list for a really long time. You know, could I take this, you know, even like Sitka blacktail hunting, right? Like, I go up into the Alpine, but obviously that's brown bear country.
That's brown bear medicine.
That's brown bear medicine, but it'll kill your deer and maybe get
you out
of a scrape, right? You know, can I shoot long range with it? Yes, but is it just a joy to carry up the hill? Yes. Is it too long or overly long? No, like, so that's one thing. This is a 22-inch barrel. Oftentimes, you'll see the 300 Wisdom come with a 23 or even a 24. This is a 22, so a little bit shorter. It is threaded. Maybe I'll suppress it someday.
10 likes, please.
And I'll also note, so this is the Sendero Light contour. So it's not the full Sendero. I think it looks absolutely perfect on this rifle. At least at the time when I got it, there wasn't a pre-fit option for the Sendero lights.
Or I think in the length that you wanted either,
Maybe it
right?
was a length thing too.
You know what's neat about that is, so I bet Mark and I have shot and loaded more 300 Wisdom in the past 6 months than any other cartridge that I've loaded in the past probably 3 years, up to and including even 6.5, which I load in a fairly high volume. And this cartridge does really good in shorter barrels. Like really, really good. Like a 20, I don't think we'd be giving up much. So for perspective, and this isn't ultimately the bullet that Mark landed on yet, the 175 LRX, we were in the upper 29s. And we were under book max from the folks at Barnes. And what we've generally observed is about 25 feet per second per inch. So if we went down to a 20 on this thing and we dropped 50 feet per second, and let's say we end up at 29-30, that's still really damned impressive.
Right.
And what a viable solution. My hope is my Christmas wish this year. I think this was my Christmas wish last year, too.
It probably may have been, yeah.
Is that Mark finds himself a suppressor under his tree. Whether he plants the tree himself and it grows, whether he plays the role of Santa Claus and fills his own Christmas desires, that would be my Christmas wish too, Mark. Point is, a 22-inch gun in this truly Magnum format cartridge is producing like exceedingly positive velocities and performances. I mean, if you haven't heard about Mark's bear hunt this year on his Washington State bear hunt, it was a hell of a hunt. It was a hell of a shot. And
I mean, this gun was ideal for that hunt, Ryan. It actually did all the things that we just talked about. It was a mountain backpack hunt, right? I was shaving weight everywhere I could. We did a podcast about that a little bit ago, the stuff I didn't take to shave weight. Underpants were included. And ended up being a long shot, right? And it did all the things I wanted it to do. It was really like, that was that entire hunt was satisfying in so many ways, right? But this gun coming together and then executing that shot and just like, it was definitely part of that.
Certainly. And it's super cool. When you look at it, it looks like a stick rifle playing like a long range gun. So I got to know, any future concessions?
Little possibilities. So I will note, so those 200 grain ELDXs, their factory loading, were leaving the pipe at 27.85. There's really no flies on that for a 200 grain bullet. The shot on that bear was 780 yards. The longest shot that I've taken on game, and we've talked about this on a couple different podcasts, but we'd been shooting this rifle so much, and I knew it was shooting so well.
Chicken-proofed.
We got the ballistic data. My confidence level was so high. Like, I didn't, when I laid down, got set up, got my Spartan bipod set up on that rock, threw my backpack underneath the buttstock for rear support. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, I don't know, let's see what happens. It was just like, execute. Got him.
And then you hunted Wisconsin with it just this last weekend.
So you and I were hunting together.
Yep.
Deer camp, round 2.
2024.
Basically a tradition at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And got an opportunity at a buck opening day evening. Kind of a funky little guy. Thought he had a little bit more going on upstairs, and his main beams just kind of come out, and like I knew he wasn't like a giant, but they kind of come out and blade, and they're not like rotten on the tips, but they're just kind of like
Weathered.
They're weathered, like the tips kind of like had that velvet that like never quite came off or whatever, and then they just kind of. That's it.
But same rifle.
Same rifle.
Intelligent optic choice. Nice weight size.
Mm-hmm.
Is it more gun than you need for a whitetail? Yeah, it worked.
As we like to say, you're not going to make anything too dead.
No.
I'd say in contrast, and maybe a little foreshadowing, I think we might talk about this a little bit in the future. Can we talk about your deer a little bit and what you took it with?
Sure.
In contrast, Ryan used a 6 arc with out of your Howa carbon stalker, loaded with your 95 grain LRX. If you want to check out some of the performance of this setup, you can see that on the Vortex Nation YouTube channel if you haven't seen the 6 arc episode of Cartridge Talks.
You know, I'll say this, not to hijack this.
6 arc terminal test is what that one's called.
Not to hijack this podcast. Some folks were not impressed with the visible results in gel, and I hear that a lot. And I understand. Like if you've never used a variety of projectiles and then done some necropsies and looked at tissue damage and looked at shot angles and distances and gotten to literally go elbow deep inside of a thoracic cavity to understand what happened upon impact, and your exposure to this is clear gelatin. Mark and I caveat this as many times as we possibly can. It is an okay medium, and we cannot stress okay enough. That bullet, that gun, that deer, that distance, devastating.
236 yards, quartering away, hit about mid ribs, exited
just behind the scapula.
Yeah.
So
it traversed a good amount of that deer and exited, and she went
10-ish.
Yeah.
Lungs vaporized, heart vaporized, lot of internal hemorrhaging. I mean, it was exactly what I wanted. My favorite part about those is their deployment and the entrance hole. I will give it probably quarter diameter through the rib cage. The exit hole between quarter and 50 cent piece. Lot of ancillary trauma around those holes too.
Her entire rib cage on the offside was gooey.
Yeah, but that's not the point. It was fun though. It was a tale of 2 cartridges, Mark on the big end, me on the marginal end. And I still think that. I still think it's probably a marginal cartridge. It's an expert's cartridge past about 150 yards because you've got to be deliberate with your bullet placement. But second big game critter I took with it, I took a pronghorn in Wyoming, 286 with it. And that was a cool shot. I had a very, very hard angle on that animal, and I had to put that bullet just forward of his ham and punched it out forward of the off shoulder.
Oh, yeah. Again, traversing a good amount of that critter and getting an exit.
Yep. And same thing, tons of trauma. But a question for you. Do you recall the unladen weight? So unloaded, but as configured? We were sub 8, right?
7.5.
Okay, so 7.5. Factory Tikka, by the way. So early on, Mark had said, how much weight can I save by changing the barrel and changing the stock? I don't think you gained any weight.
I was able to shave 5 ounces.
Okay, so that's significant. Couple things. You're running Tally ultralights. They're a spectacularly light system. A little limiting on where you can put your scope, but super light system, which is really cool. The gun came together, I think, famously. From my perspective, one thing that definitely went up in performance or use with this gun was the recoil characteristics.
I'm glad you brought that up, and that's exactly what I was going to talk about next.
So it's not that the factory Tikka stock is bad. I hear some people say their recoil pads are like tire lugs. They're stiff, but they're not unyielding, right? There's more to it than the recoil pad that makes this rifle, I think, immediately more shootable.
Mm-hmm.
So 3 parts. 1, this barrel. You can feel, if you get enough time behind a heavier profile carbon barrel, and I'm talking a wrapped, not a sleeve,
Mm-hmm.
but a wrapped barrel, they have a definite different feel to the gun when you shoot them. If the only thing you change is the barrel, there's immediately a tangible there. If you
Is
will.
there like is it like a deadening factor?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And you know, Matt was talking about that as well, how he has noticed steel barrels tuning versus carbon barrels tuning. The guns seem to be far more tolerant to erratic muzzle velocities and seem to tune a little bit nicer. Second part, and I think probably the bigger contributor, is the stock material and design. Little bit higher comb height on the HT than on the standard Tikka.
Yep.
It's still slightly low for my personal preference, and it also has a little more width to it.
I was gonna say it's got a little more width. It's a little bit, I'd say, like rounder
Yep.
on top. To me, much more comfortable.
Yes. And then it does have a softer recoil pad. And I'm not talking like this thing is the, the new My Pillow, but it's definitely a softer recoil pad. Too soon?
You got me.
The recoil
You
subject.
know that guy's almost talked me into a pillow about 10 times.
Really? I mean, there's still time.
It's a convincing argument.
The recoil seems to be half of what you'd expect. Like when you shoot it, you go, oh, that's not what I thought.
This gun is not bad to shoot.
It's actually,
and it's not braked. It's not suppressed.
I would say it's akin to my 16-inch Tikka 308 with no can.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
And even on the Spartan, which is a little bit of a different bipod than say like a Harris or an Atlas or whatever the contemporary is, right? You would expect a bit of bounce. It's very controllable. And the recoil is pleasant. I bet I shot the most I ran out of this gun in one string was probably 38 rounds. That's a lot of wisdom. Not fatigued. Good to go. There really isn't anything I think that you could do to further improve that other than if you put one of those things on the end. Mark, it's got right underneath this knurled cap here. You'll see how this comes off. So the end of that barrel is already ready to accept, a muzzle device that you put on the end that reduces recoil as well as report and blast. These days they call them
threads are for
suppressors, and you can get them pretty readily. I recommend the Mac Brothers Zenith.
That's a good one. I've used yours a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. So the gun, like I said, famous. You lost 5 ounces.
Lost 5 ounces.
You
shoots better.
Yep.
Recoil pull. Well, maybe doesn't shoot better. Shoots the same, I would say, at the end of the day. Recoil impulse to me is way better.
Way better.
Cheek weld is more comfortable. It's shorter.
Yep.
Shorter, lighter, handier. Shoots well at long range. This LHT 3-15 complements it quite well.
Very well.
Like I said, shot that bear at a pretty darn far distance with a 3-15 and didn't necessarily feel undergunned. I wouldn't have wanted to shoot beyond that, and I just don't want to shoot beyond it. That was, I guess never say never, but that was as far as I want to try and take a poke at anything. I will say this: conditions were perfect. It was the morning. There was no wind. It was one of those things. You're like, hey, if I'm going to make a shot like this and feel responsible about it, like those were the conditions to do it.
The only other thing I hope you think about changing.
We should talk about that.
This is a pipe dream of mine. It's not my rifle. I'm not the guy in charge of this ship. So exists a magazine that solves a problem that Mark and I ran into when we were working up hand loads for it. It's an aftermarket magazine. It's a billet design. Requires the purchase of a extended bolt stop as well. So whether it's a Tikka L bolt stop or a Mountain Tactical or a Bighorn Armory, there's an extended magazine that would allow the load that I developed for Mark's gun to feed perfect without impediment and do a really, really, really good job. And I don't know that he's necessarily going to, this isn't going to unlock some level of performance out of the gun that you're not achieving. Will it give you something different than what you have? I think yes, right? I'm a proponent of Barnes bullets and picking up a little bit more MV while paired with a relatively high BC, is only, more checks in the in the pro column as opposed to the con.
Well,
It's an expensive magazine, though.
It is.
Yep.
For me this year, it's like, man, we got this thing shooting. It's shooting the bullets, gonna knock anything down that I'm gonna point it at.
You were up against the wall of time as well.
Yeah, so I got it ready for that late August hunt. And frankly, Ryan, I just didn't feel like fiddling with it because I knew it was working. I'm like, got a couple other things coming up this fall, and this is going to work just fine. And maybe that'll be a nice little winter project because it doesn't take. I can still shoot those 200 grain ELDXs, but it'll just open the door for us to shoot those hand loads as well with the 175 LRX seated out a little bit further. Yep. So it'll give us something to do this winter.
That's a big project.
Okay, I'll have to order it. Cool, man. I'm really happy with it. Super stoked on it. Again, this is kind of my new do-all killing stick. And so far it's performed great and knocked a couple things down with it, and it's done everything I've wanted it to do, including the way it looks. Like the aesthetic is exactly
rifle.
what I was looking for personally.
Very sharp rifle.
Yeah. There you have it.
Little plate, Mark.
My customized Tikka 300 WSM. Yep. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Thanks for writing in and requesting this podcast so I could talk about my new rifle. And what do you think? Have you customized a Tikka? Would you have done it like this? You looking to do something different? Really shorten the barrel?
Should Mark get a suppressor?
And we all know the answer to that. It's like, I know the answer to that.
We gave you an ultimatum at deer camp last year.
I know. I'm glad you guys didn't follow through with the consequence.
I don't remember what it was.
I don't know either, but it probably wasn't good. It was a consequence.
Probably a disbarring of the next deer camp.
Oh, then I would definitely get a suppressor.
That's what it takes?
Yeah.
I got to send some text messages.
If I'm going to get kicked out, I'll get one. All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. How would you customize your Tikka? Have you customized the Tikka? Let us know in the comments below. We'll catch you on the next one.
See you.
Bye.